I remember.
The artist, the manager, and the agent
Yeah.
determined the artist's future, the artist's career, where they played, and the promoter was working for them. And so
I recall.
the promoter was at the beck and call, the mercy,
Yeah.
responsible to the agent. Howard Stein was doing concerts at the Academy of Music on 14th Street. Howard Stein moved on, became a disco and club impresario, and that opened up, that left an opening for Ron. Kathy would know more about
I don't
that.
recall Ron's relationship with Howard Stein.
Right, it wasn't like John Scher. It wasn't this.
No. It was cordial. It was cordial.
The building, it was on 14th Street between 3rd and 4th Avenues. It's an NYU dorm now. It was a 3,385 seat concert hall. And it had been in disrepair when it was the Academy of Music. Not a nickel in maintenance went into it. I mean, it was all graffitied up. The seats were ripped. But it had a big stage, 60-foot proscenium stage. I don't think so. It was run by, it was owned by United Artists Theaters. They were showing movies there, and it was legitimate movies, to the best of my knowledge. It was a vaudeville, and I think it was built as an opera house originally, and maybe the original Academy of Music was across the street where the Con Ed building is now, and then it moved across the street, but it was an elegant theater in its day. Yeah, without spending much money, because it was going to be a concert hall. My recollection is that it was a $40,000 budget to renovate it. And United Artists put up 30 and Ron put up 10. And for $40,000 in 1976, that you could do some things with that.
And Ron had to quickly turn it around because he had decided no longer to do shows at the Beacon.
Right.
The Beacon, the two gentlemen from the Beacon, something went haywire.
That's funny you say. I haven't thought of that in a lot of years, but that comes back to me.
It's like two guys in the rug business, and they were like ripping him off. And
I don't know. Ron has a way with words.
It had this Deco logo.
I think that David Byrd created.
Yeah, it had a lease. He had an
what is
exclusive.
that?
It provided a solid foundation for the business. There was a venue that needed to be booked, and he could present acts as needed. He didn't have to reserve a date, block out a time, compete with somebody else for a date. And if you wanted to play New York, this was the concert hall. It was. It was a real home base. And again, there weren't 50 clubs. There weren't so many options. You know, we've come out here to Williamsburg, to this beautiful facility. This didn't exist. I mean, there weren't alternatives. So to have a concert hall where you could make money, that's a lot of seats. You could generate a substantial gross. There were good deals down there, so labor wasn't particularly expensive, and artists could make money, and a promoter could make some money there. The Palladium became the home for Ron. It was readily available. It needed to be booked. It needed artists, and artists needed that. And that gave Ron clout and stability. Taxi Driver. Those grisly scenes in Taxi Driver were filmed around the corner from the Palladium. 14th Street was about 4 levels below 42nd Street. Between 2nd and 3rd Avenue on 14th Street, it was all drug addicts, pill pushers, drunks, street prostitutes. It was nasty. This is New York in the 70s. The city was falling apart. So this was not a good neighborhood. The first show in mid-September that the Palladium opened with, the band and Chris Hillman. Great show, 2 sold-out shows. There was a really positive review in the New York Times about how the venue had been cleaned up and how much better it was. And there were security guards in the bathrooms so that drug dealers weren't hanging out there all the time. And it was a very positive light on this new development. So the following week, I think there were 2 weeks between shows, if I recall, and for some reason I'm remembering that the second show were the Outlaws, and that could be wrong, but in between there was a bomb went off outside the facility during the night or something like that. A real bomb, not just a couple firecrackers or M80s or something, ash cans tied together. This was a bomb that ripped the doors off the hinges and mangled them. And I think that there was some talk that it was a Spanish gang. There was some street war going on. And why it was at the Palladium, I don't know. There was also certainly some thought that this was a means of intimidation from somebody, whether it was a competitor, whether it was coming into the neighborhood. It was never known, and nobody was hurt, but that was a serious bomb. It was, something like that happens, and there's no ready explanation. You start to...
There's no resolution to it at all.
And you start to think, well, what could it be? And so, certainly you think competition. Competition was much more intense at other times, but it could have been somebody else. There were other promoters who did occasional shows. You just don't know. That was a serious rock and roll
had
theater.
Roll Down Gates, too.
And then put down Roll Down
Gates.
Down Gates right after that.
Befitting the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Roll Down Gates.
But and the Palladium was a rock and roll hall. Although you should point out that it did a variety of music in there. There were jazz shows there. Talking about Ron's vision, Dolly Parton played there. Wow, that's weird, but she played there. And sometimes artists wanted to expand their audience or do something different, or Ron convinced them of that.
In the beginning, I think it was hard to get people to come down to 14th Street, to come down to this neighborhood. The Palladium wasn't uptown, it was downtown, and artists were reluctant. So it was a big deal to have the band open the Palladium, and then more and more artists would play there, and I think some of those shows became so legendary. Was Hot Tuna?
Hot Tuna, but the Zappa shows.
But Halloween
getting this
are legendary.
And it did. It got off to a quick start. I have a recollection that there were 21 shows in 28 days, in the first 28 days there. And that's a lot of concerts.
The Stones played there.
And then the Stones went on to play. But it was
Hot Tuna.
Hot Tuna. Mostly it was 2 guys, just Yorma and Jack. They would come on, they would start it was generally during Thanksgiving weekend. Friday night and Saturday night of Thanksgiving weekend, kids were home from college, they were off, and this was the precursor of jam bands, if ever there was. The Dead and the whole San Francisco thing, certainly, but the New York version became the Hot Tuna shows. They would come on stage, and sometimes I think there might be a third player with them.